Mandla, my name is Tariq Lala. I'm an NEC member of the South African Students' Congress. I will be unpacking the Higher Education Transformation Commission, which is going to be presented at the NPC happening later this week. It will happen under the theme Revolutionary Strategy to Policy Action, positioning the Students' Charter as an engine of transformation in the post-schooling and higher education sector. Today, we will unpack the discussion document, which is to say SASCO's 2025 Higher Education Transformation Proposal, which is more than just a policy. It's a generational mandate crafted by students for students to fundamentally transform the post-schooling education and training sector. There are 5 sections in the document which cover the Students' Charter, the rollout of the Students' Charter, legislation amendments, whether it's the Higher Education Act, the Skills Development Act, or others, and finally funding free education and SASCO's position. Section 1 speaks to the Students' Charter. The Students' Charter, which is say the heartbeat of the entire program. The Students' Charter is fundamental because it declares education as a public good, as a democratic right, and a tool to dismantle inequality. It identifies 6 pillars that guide our agenda of transformation. Access to education for all, environments that support student success, a transformed and decolonized curriculum, guaranteed pathways to employment, student well-being, and finally, democratic student power in institutional governance. The Charter is not symbolic. It is a framework for law, policy, and action. In everything that follows, from legislative reform to funding models, everything is designed to manifest and subsequently translate the principles into reality. The rollout of the Students' Charter, Section 2 of the document, and building the Summit of Students in South Africa, is effectively how SASCO intends to ensure that there's a national rollout strategy, which will culminate in the summit, which we will now refer to as SOSA. Section 2, rolling out the Charter and building SOSA. To bring the vision of the Students' Charter to life, SOSA is implementing a national rollout strategy that culminates in the Summit of South African Students. SOSA is envisioned as a historic gathering, the first multi-organizational, student-led platform of its kind in 3 decades of democracy. Its purpose is simple but profound: to unite students, youth organizations, labor, civil society, and the state around a shared program to transform the higher education system. The rollout is structured. National, provincial, regional, and branch structures each have clear targets: securing organizational endorsements, collecting thousands of individual student endorsements, hosting campus meetings, political education sections and seminars, and to ensure that the ongoing Student Charter is blitzed across all campuses. All of this work builds towards SOSA, the Summit of Students in South Africa, a democratic and inclusive summit where stakeholders collaboratively develop implementation programs anchored within the context of the Students' Charter. Section 3 of the document is very specific in its agenda to ensure that legislation keeps up with what we're trying to achieve in the context of the Students' Charter. The document outlines an extensive package of proposed amendments to the Higher Education Act, the Skills Development Act, the NQF Act, and the SAQA Act, amongst others. These reforms aim to dismantle legal barriers that hinder transformation and suppress student power. Key proposals include strengthening democratic co-governance by increasing student and worker representation on university councils, requiring joint drafting of major university policies with at least 50% university students and worker involvement, regulating large donations to prevent institutional capture by the private sector and private interests in general, inserting formal provisions for curriculum transformation and decolonization and systemic redress, assigning an IEC to every SRC election across the country, and finally enhancing transparency through mandatory publication of council minutes. One of the most significant proposals is the creation of a national higher education ombudsman, an independent statutory office with investigative powers and authority that would address the abuses of institutional power. This ombudsman would protect students, staff, enforce accountability, and recommend systemic reforms across the sector. Transformation of skills and qualification system is the 4th section of the discussion document. The document argues that the Skills Development Act, the SDA, and qualifications framework have not kept pace with South Africa's changing in education landscape. Students are largely excluded from these systems, even though we are the majority stakeholders and more often than not, the ones primarily affected. Proposed reforms include adding student representation to SETAs, National Skills Authority, as well as SAQA, improving transparency about learnerships, internships, and placement rates. We also intend to rewrite objectives to explicitly include redress for financial inequality, language exclusion, curriculum bias, and gender disparities. The fifth section of the discussion document speaks to that of funding free education and funding reform. The final section is effectively presenting a comprehensive model in which we intend to fund free, quality higher education to all in South Africa. It begins with the issue of historical student debt. SASCO argues that university reserves, public reserves accumulated over decades, must be declared and returned to the Department of Higher Education and Training to ensure that student debt is cleared and to fund urgent developing needs within the sector. Next, the document tackles the student accommodation crisis. The document proposes banning book and administration fees, aligning all accommodation costs with the NSFAS cap, expropriating property for publicly owned student housing, and using university reserves to build new accommodation or fund state-owned student villages. The document then proceeds to outline 3 long-term solutions in order to ensure that there's adequate funding. First and foremost is progressive taxation. This includes a wealth tax aimed at the richest 5% of this country, not only to fund free education, but also to ensure an adequate and robust social safety net. The second speaks to innovative policy decisions around, for example, the Prescribed Assets Act, which would require institutional investors to support public developmental sectors, including higher education. The final is the establishment of the Sovereign Wealth Fund, which funded partly by nationalized mineral resources, which would reinvest public wealth into infrastructure and specifically educational infrastructure. These proposals aim to build sustainable, publicly funded higher education system that is free, fully resourced, and accessible to all. Look, the document submitted to the NPC is not a set of recommendations, it's a political program. It positions students as the central actors within the higher education sector, and it provides legal, economic, and strategic tools for transformation. Through SOSA, it builds a democratic process to carry forth this transformative agenda. The Students' Charter gives us vision, the legislative amendments give us the tools, the funding proposals give us the resources. SOSA provides a national platform to unite students and society at large in this transformative struggle. The message is clear. The future of higher education belongs to the people, and students will lead the way. Build a charter, build a branch. Amandla.